Well, Tony, I'm glad that you could come on the podcast and that you've accommodated time today to come on. So it's great to have someone of your experience, your knowledge, your background on the pod. And I know that you're involved in a lot of different sort of concepts and backgrounds right now, but it's always great when guests give their own sort of background and insight to who they are, because they're the ones who are the experts on themselves. So it'd be great for you to open up the floor into who you are, your experience, and what you're going to bring to the pod.
Well, have you got all day?
Absolutely, for you.
Yeah, it's quite a long CV. Yeah, I guess obviously go back to the days of when I was a professional player. Obviously, I played youth football, so I was fortunate enough to be selected as one of the best 25 footballers in the country at the time, when I was selected for the FA National School. Which was based at Lilleshall National Sports Centre, and the group I was in, we were the first ever group. We were selected through regional and national trials over a period of months, and then obviously we were selected as the first group ever to go to the national school in 1984. So that's kind of where sort of the sort of professional journey started, I guess, as a player. So, that sort of instilled in me sort of the art of training regularly, playing regularly, and being involved in the game at the highest level, also exposed me to sort of top level coaching for the first time. So I guess in essence, that's where the coaching bug first caught. So that's at that time that gave me the first real opportunity to be exposed to sort of top level coaching. Our head coach was a fantastic coach named Dave Sexton. Obviously, long and illustrious history in the game. Managed some of the top clubs in the country, and obviously worked with England for a long time. And then obviously we had an in-house goalkeeper coach by the name of Mike Kelly. Mike was our in-house goalkeeper coach for 2 years, and kind of he was the one that sort of instigated, I guess, my love of sharing knowledge and sort of wanting to help others and to become a coach eventually once I'd finished my playing career. Mike was fantastic for us, and obviously I say us, the other goalkeeper selected in that group, God rest his soul, was Alan Miller, the former Arsenal goalkeeper. We lost Alan a few years ago, passed away unfortunately, but we were the two goalkeepers there, so we spent most days with Mike, and the level of detail that he used to go into, it's not something that I forgot. So that stuck with me, and his methodology, the way he shared his message, had a big influence on me. So massive amount to thank him for. So we spent 2 years there and represented England, youth level, schoolboy level. Had some fantastic opportunities to travel the world, played at Wembley 3 times, as a 14, 15, 16-year-old. So unbelievable experiences that money can't buy. And obviously they stayed with me, as I went through my journey, and give me the opportunity to learn from those situations. And, if needed to in the future, I could share those with others who might be put into that situation and have to deal with those moments, So that was the first exposure. And obviously I went into the professional game, signed for Birmingham City, my boyhood club, after being sort of sought after by a number of clubs, Manchester United, Notts Forest, Villa, to name but a few. But obviously for my love of Birmingham, that meant that I ended up signing for Birmingham and turning professional with them. And then obviously I went on to play, for 5 other clubs over a career spanning 13 years, and played in over 250 league and cup games. And unfortunately got injured at my last club, Scarborough, and I had to finish playing. And naturally I just felt that for me, the transition into coaching was something that I wanted to do. I've been working on while I was still playing. Really, hadn't done my qualifications, but always found a way to work with and coach sort of the younger elements at the clubs I was playing for. So for me, when I retired, it was just a natural transition to go into coaching, and the rest is history, as they say.
And when you sort of retired, then looking back on the experience that you have playing at Wembley, being part of the youth teams, being at the schoolboys, having 250 games behind you, those experiences will shape the way that you also think about the game today and the way that you take those experiences from first hand. But when you retired and obviously retiring early, was that a real tough point for you to go, oh, actually, my career's ended earlier than I was perhaps expecting?
The tough part was not being able to be an athlete. I think the injury, obviously I injured my back, so tore some ligaments in my spine, which obviously meant that I couldn't sort of run properly. Basically, I could move around and do what I needed to do, but to run and sprint at high level, high speed as a goalkeeper would need to move around the goal effectively, I couldn't do it. So in the end, the surgeons advised me to stop playing professionally. But I think at that point, the last couple of seasons of my career, because of the injury, I actually did it when I was playing at Cardiff. Then it reoccurred when I was at Scarborough. So my body was kind of going, yeah, enough is enough. And maybe those early years at Lillishall, training sometimes up to 3 sessions a day towards the end of our time at Lillishall probably took its toll. So perhaps I trained too much, played too much at a young age, and while my body was still developing, and so on. Of course, nowadays everything's managed and monitored in terms of minutes and amount of time on the training field and in the gym and so on. It wasn't back then, but I think at that stage I've kind of gone, yeah, my body's had enough. I've given enough to the game physically, played enough minutes and been around it, training day in, day out. And I was kind of beat up a little bit. So in the end, I think it was a little bit of an easier transition than it might have been. As I say, I think the hardest thing was not being able to be an athlete, not being able to just go for a run or lift weights or whatever. I think also I missed that buzz that had that contact with the fans. Not so much the adulation that you got from them, but it was I just loved the connection with the supporters and the home fans, enjoying watching us play, but also I suppose in a way the away fans and the banter that we used to have and stuff. So running out in front of a big crowd and just feeling the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you hear the roar, and when you make a big save and you sense the excitement in the crowd. It's those probably were the things that I miss more than anything. I miss it now because I love coaching and I get my joys from watching others have those exhilarating moments. But from me in the early days when I retired, that's kind of what I miss more than anything.
And it is part of that sort of feeling, the moment that you touch the grass and just being back on it. And I know my friend, he works in education and he's always enjoyed playing, but he's perhaps happy to not play and just take it casually. Whereas I'm like, if you really want to play that much, you'd be back in it in a moment. And he talks to me about times when, do you know what, I'm actually in a position where we both work in education. We have very similar roles within that. And he's like, do you know what? We're settled in life. Why do we want to go back in? And why do we want to put in the extra hours and stuff? And I'm like, mate, do you know how much I just miss being on the grass or just missing the smell or just pulling out some cones? And it's the big things that I think he doesn't get. And I think it's when you have those moments that you loved being around the crowd, you loved hearing it, and you feel that, every time that you walk out and that roar comes out or you're ready to be on the pitch in that lineup. And when you sort of look back, you're never going to have those moments where you walk out in front of a crowd and hear that experience again. And it can be really difficult. So being involved in the game at some capacity, you only feel it inside, that love for it that you always want to maintain, and it's always going to be within you somewhere.
Yeah, it is. I think, I always looked at it, we were kind of, we were entertainers, weren't actors because it was real, we were doing the role for real. But at times, because you're going in front of a big audience and you're performing, you were entertaining, and that's the way I saw the game. I just loved playing the game. So the thrill now doesn't come from that. As I said to you, the thrill for me comes from, offering the knowledge, sharing detail with those that I'm lucky enough to work with, and seeing the thrill that they get from running out onto the pitch and getting the adulation from the crowd, and like I say, getting opportunities to play at a high level, or getting selected for England, or going and performing on the biggest stage in major tournaments, and being on the podium when they're being awarded with a medal, or winning goalkeeper of the tournament, one tournament after another. I've been lucky enough to work with people that have actually achieved those things. So that's the joy I get now, is knowing that I've played, just a small part in their journey and helped them get to where they've got to, and to receive those accolades and those rewards. And that's the joy I get now. So I get the buzz from somewhere else, so it's not the way it used to be. It's different now, but the buzz is still the same, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does, and that's part of the reason that I coach, and it's that enjoyment. And just thinking about when you're talking there, reflecting back on a session I had earlier this week. So I've just returned to a club. I've been with them about 5 weeks now, and I'm just getting to know different boys, different groups, coaching across every age group at the moment, and working with the different coaches. And I can think of a young goalkeeper that we have. He's currently in our under 11s, and he's showing excellent potential. And reflecting upon a coaching capacity into what he does as a goalkeeper in terms of what I've listened to from you, if we look at him at say 10 years of age, and he's perhaps been a goalkeeper for about a year now, and he might play up until 30, so he's going to look at maybe 20 years between the ages now. And you have to think of every training session, every game where he's falling on the floor, he's constantly putting his elbow, or he's got his shoulder there, and he's constantly clattering in, or he's running out catching a ball, he's around defenders, and he's doing all the catching and opposed practice as well. And by the time that accumulates over a 20-year period, and again at the age of 30, he is still very, very young as a goalkeeper, but we incorporate these years, that what he's doing now and what we expect him to be doing, from that own sort of experience that you have, and coming away with an injury, and all those years of diving on the floor, and what you see now as a goalkeeping coach, and what you see from your goalkeepers. Is there a way of protecting our goalkeepers to sort of go, right, there's a bit more longevity in there for them to maybe not have as many physical injuries from a younger age? Is there anything, under 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s goalkeepers should perhaps be avoiding or protected in a little way from your experience?
I think in that sense, like I said to you, especially at top level, the game's managed so much more effectively now. The players are taken care of. The time they spend on the grass is monitored. Their preparation, whether it be a physical preparation, whether it be nutrition, whatever that is, it looks so much different to what it used to. We didn't have that support back in the day when I played. We were lucky to have a goalkeeper coach, let alone a sports scientist or a nutritionist, So in that sense, it has evolved and developed, and the players are taken much more care of now. And obviously, prevention of injury, and when players do get injured, the rehabilitation that they they're allowed and that they have, and the processes that they go through is so much more professional and thorough. So that's different. I think in terms of young keepers, I think it's just common sense, really. You look at the facilities we use nowadays. I remember growing up and playing on, asphalt, gravel, and concrete pitches, and playing five-a-side indoor without any mats on the floor and stuff, So, but you've also got to remember, I've been involved in futsal for many, many years. A big advocate of the game. I was involved in the England's futsal squad for 10 years. So the goalkeepers in futsal play on hard surfaces, on hard courts. But what they've done is they've become more effective and efficient in terms of their save making. So because the surfaces are hard, because, the impact will take its toll if they're doing it too regularly, rather than diving on the surfaces now to make a save, they're actually using feet. And you see in the modern game now, you see goalkeepers making saves with the feet, split saves. They're spreading more. They're using the block technique rather than diving at feet and throwing the body on the line. So the game's kind of created and evolved into this safer environment, I think, for goalkeepers in terms of the techniques that we use. There are some that don't support saves with the feet. At the end of the day, the game has evolved and developed this side of save making, this use of the technique. It is more effective and efficient in certain situations. So I'm not saying that the goalkeepers won't dive, but what it does do, it does reduce the impact on the side of the body, on the hips, on the shoulders, on the knees and so on and so forth. And what it does call for is more preparation in terms of flexibility around the goalkeeper. So they're having to do a lot more of that kind of work in the gym. So it's making them more pliable, making them more flexible and more robust. So that's helping in a sense. I think it is just common sense, really, if you are working with younger keepers, just recognise, the facilities you're using. Just make sure that you're not asking the goalkeepers to do something that you probably wouldn't want to do. If you are playing on a hard surface, you're going to do a shot stopping practice. Well, that might not be wise. You might do more of an in possession based practice where the goalkeepers are predominantly just using their feet and so on. So you're lessening the opportunity to have impact on the body and saving your shot stopping practices and 1v1 type practices for when you are on the softer ground and more pliable ground, so that it's easier for the goalkeepers in terms of impact. So I think it really is just about common sense and looking after the athletes that you're working with.
And I think there's such great coaching points within themselves as well, because just as I'm sitting here thinking from a host and a coach perspective, right, if I've got a listener who's perhaps a coach coming in going, all right, I want to take some goalkeeping techniques away, actually that's quite a good technique that they might not have considered, and they've also not maybe have considered their environment as such. So they might be going on solid ground this week on grass, and perhaps it hasn't rained for a couple of weeks now because we're in the summer period. Actually, how much does that impact your goalkeepers if you're expecting them to have a high intensity training session as a youngster? Actually, how can you condition your game whereby you're reducing the amount of dives that they have to make over, say, a summer period, and actually get them to look at their technical ability, i.e. playing out from the back, what they're using their feet, etc., and actually protecting them in a way that you're considering it from a grassroots perspective, and perhaps in an experience that you have working with these goalkeepers. Because again, as you say there, it might be a limit on goalkeeper coaches, but if we're in a grassroots environment, you might just have one coach allocated to a team who's a parent who stepped up, and they might not have that goalkeeping experience, and therefore they're expecting their goalkeepers to be rolling around, diving, rushing out, etc. Where actually there's some key takeaways in what you've just said there, in what they can incorporate and maybe just tweak their practice too.
That's it, and I've seen it. I've seen it where goalkeepers are playing on a poor surface, perhaps an area of a parks pitch where the grass is worn, and the coach is doing some type of finishing practice, and one ball after another is going past the goalkeeper because they won't dive. So all you do is you start to then create bad habits, poor habits, where the goalkeeper gets into a little bit of a rut and they won't dive because of the surface, and they don't want to get hurt, and I wouldn't want to, because I know the perils and the pitfalls of that constant sort of impact on the body and so on. It does take its toll. So again, like I said, it's just common sense. It's recognizing what you have at hand at your disposal, what's best going to benefit the people that you're working with, i.e. your goalkeepers, and then obviously adapting your practice, like you mentioned, to befit the environment that you're in. Like I said, if you're working on concrete, I ain't going to do shot stopping, because ultimately I'm not going to get great returns from your goalkeeper. So what I might do, because it's a flat surface, then I might start working on a little bit of possession based type practice, because ball's going to run truer probably for the goalkeeper, and they can get more sort of fluent contacts and be able to move the ball a little bit more easier. So like I said, just common sense, know the room, recognise the environment, and adapt your practice accordingly.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that, and it sort of fits in with an element whereby you might be sort of a squad manager or a coach, and you're looking for for your players to progress from maybe being outfielders into a goalkeeper, right? Because the proportion of outfielders to goalkeepers is much higher, right? But it's that actually opposite effect in terms of a goalkeeper that I'm thinking about, and he's actually wanting to transition out from being a goalkeeper into an outfield player, but he doesn't mind going in every now and then. Excellent shot stopper, great penalty saver, really good at diving, all round good in terms of that technical ability. Just maybe lacks communication, lacks maybe that awareness of when to rush out, maybe lacks awareness around tactical sort of positioning and how that fits in from his perspective, right? But still, he's only 13 years of age. There's still a lot of a development and education pathway for him. But rather than the question of going, right, how do we get outfielders to become goalkeepers? If you knew that you had that goalkeeper and you knew he was technically sound and he had great potential, but he said, "Do you know what, Tony? I'm looking at perhaps being an outfield player." What sort of conversation would you have for him? Because some coaches might go, "No, you are going to stay the goalkeeper," or some might go, "No, you are going to be the outfield player." How would you approach that?
I think the primary role that we have is making sure that those that we work with are happy in what they're doing and want to do what they want to do in terms of playing the game. We play the game because we love the game. I would never ever force a player to play in a position that they didn't want to play. Now, noted in a game situation, you may have to ask a player, look, we're struggling in that position this week, or in game you might have to just basically put a substitute on that might have to go in a non-default position, if that makes sense, to facilitate that position in the team. So in that sense, you're not forcing them, you're asking them to sort of go and do a job for you. In terms of the young goalkeeper, no, I wouldn't block them from wanting to make that transition either way. There's got to be a willingness from the individual to want to do something, or to want to play in a certain position. We can't dictate to them or force them to play in that position. For me, naturally, as a goalkeeper coach, if you see an outfield player that has probably some of the skills and attributes of a goalkeeper, and they want to have a go at playing at that position, then jackpot. That's fantastic, because look at where the game is now. The goalkeeper in general, especially at top level, will probably spend 70-75% of the time playing with the feet, compared to playing with the hands. So why not have that transition? I think the key is, from a young age, and I often get asked the question, there's no reason why, and I think it's commonly known anyway, that you wouldn't rotate your players and allow them to have, an opportunity to play in goal. Again, you wouldn't force it, you would give them the option, and you'll have some willing takers. You will have players that want to have a go in goal, put the gloves on, So I think that's an idea. I think the other one that I came up with, and I spoke to people about quite often, obviously in your training sessions, how often do coaches, and it might be to do with the expertise and the knowledge, but how often do even grassroots club actually do goalkeeping sessions for the whole group? So the whole team have a go, even if it's like in a warm-up situation for 15-20 minutes. Actually, the whole group are doing some kind of goalkeeping activity as a warm-up, so that they can get a feel for what it's like to be a goalkeeper. Whether that be doing a little bit of handling, whether it be doing a little bit of 1v1. Because don't forget now, when you look at defending, especially defending in the box, because of the way the laws of the game are changing. How many times do you see a defender now drop into like that big, long K barrier type shape to defend with their arms behind the back and so on and so forth? Well, what do you see goalkeepers doing? Goalkeepers are now using the block shape, more prevalent than we ever have done. So there are links and connections now to the way defenders will shape up, especially in the box, to the way the goalkeepers are defending the area in terms of using the block shape. So that there are connections now between some of the work defenders are doing and goalkeepers are doing. So for me, I don't see any reason why you couldn't just do a generic goalkeeping session within your team, just to give everybody a little bit of a taste of what goalkeeping looks like and what it feels like. And I'm not saying you would do that every session. You might do it once a month, but then what might happen is, as has happened many times, and experiences that I've had shared with me, is that suddenly the coaches find an absolute diamond, and suddenly there's a young goalkeeper, male or female, that they look at and go, wow, they've got what it takes, and actually they enjoy it, and they go, yeah, I want to try some of that, I want to do some of that. So without doing that, you would never have found that diamond, and there's an opportunity missed. So I think, just exposing all the group to a little bit of goalkeeping won't hurt, if you don't do it too often. And there's another way of maybe getting your younger group in particular to want to do some goalkeeping work on rotation within your team.
And I think there's a few points within that which I've really taken away, and I completely agree with you, because as much as I managed this player previously a few years ago, and he was always on the cusp of that, he wanted to be an outfield player, but was still happy to play in. And we sort of used that to an advantage. We're like, right, we've still got this motivation where he wants to play in. How much longer can we maximize it for? And therefore, when he's ready to take that transition, we're going to be very supportive of it. As much as we're going to be gutted to lose an excellent goalkeeper, actually, he's staying part of the game. That's a big win for us. Rather than going, I've had enough playing all together. I actually want to to go outfield. Now we've extended his playing longevity for a few more years. How many years can we get him remaining within the sport, right? But if he's then going outfield, actually, how many technical abilities is he developing? How does he know when to pass? Where does he know where his pitch geography is? How does he know when he's being pressed and under pressure? No, actually, that's where all of his education comes in. And actually, when he goes back to being in a goalkeeper, when he decides whether that's in training or we can utilize him in a game, he's actually got that applied knowledge which we can take away and build upon that. So it's actually a little bit of a win-win for us rather than seeing it as a negative, and use it in that position to go, actually, we can work with this goalkeeper on an individual level and then a technical level as a goalkeeper. And then can we look at the outfield stuff in from another perspective? I also like what you said there in terms of that consideration of those environments where you've got the whole team training together, right? And also you want those goalkeepers to understand what your tactical sort of plays, your playing principles, how they fit into the team and all that. But then it's that what we've identified as club is actually, can we utilize our first team goalkeeper at the top of the club to bring all the junior players together and have once a month just getting together at the moment, training and getting them as a goalkeeping union, just to get an insight into what it's like to play for the first team, get an insight from an experienced goalkeeper, what sort of takeaways can he give them. So it's actually us going, all right, we've identified this situation and going, we're missing that at the moment because we've had some really good goalkeepers, and as much as they're incorporated into that team environment, what they're actually missing is that sort of isolated training for them to focus on those goalkeeping elements, for them to really have those takeaways, for them to really look at, right, what do we need to work on technically as a group of goalkeepers. So I think that's a really important situation to go, actually, we've incorporated them as a team, but actually where does that isolated training come from? And then lastly there, you talked about it was in my head, it's completely gone, that final point there. But yeah, it's just completely gone, that final point. But if I come back to it, but I think it's that identification of knowing those goalkeepers do have to have some isolated training at some point to really benefit them.
I think, yeah, and then that comes down to the knowledge and expertise of those that are leading the sessions, and I've been a big advocate of years that, all grassroots clubs should have at least one qualified goalkeeper coach within their system, and the club should support that, because then if there is a need for, like I've mentioned, maybe a generic goalkeeping piece, or session to be delivered, then at least you've got somebody at hand that can go and deliver that. And if you haven't, then obviously there's enough quality goalkeeper coaches around that you can tap into to actually come in and deliver those sessions for you, to make sure that the detail delivered is of the right level, and the goal, the players are going to gain a broader and greater understanding of the role of the goalkeeper, and they take that away with them. I think the other thing for me is, we're more than happy to incorporate goalkeepers into possession-based practices and throw them in with the outfield players. But all we'd be doing is kind of reversing that a little bit and bringing the outfield players into more of a goalkeeper-oriented session. But also, the challenge to the coaches is, when you're delivering your practices, how many of you actually focus on the role of the goalkeeper within your practice? So you might be working on, playing out from the back, but how many of the coaches, in particular with grassroots clubs, how many of the coaches would actually have enough knowledge and understanding of the role of the goalkeeper in that, which is massive now, in terms of like a restart, goal kick, where did he start from, how did he start, who did he play to, and then actually the build, in open play. So what's their sort of connection with the situation once they've started the play? Where does it go from there? So how much time and focus is spent on the role that the goalkeeper plays in that, which of course is probably the most important piece of the jigsaw, when you're building the attack. So again, just for me, it's just about offering that knowledge and that understanding to those that require it. And if you haven't got it within your club system, then there's enough out there for you to source that and to bring some expertise in to help all your players, not just your goalkeepers.
And that expertise and that final point that I've actually recalled within that, I actually really like that element of going, right, let's get all the players in our squad. We might have 15 today. Let's have 20 minutes and they can all do catching and practice, for example, right? And then how can we incorporate that? Actually, now we've got two people who've come forward who've gone, I don't mind going in goals, and therefore you have that opportunity to develop them as goalkeepers maybe over the course of the next few months and however long you've got them. And then you've got that rotational style where, oh, actually, we're missing little Joey today. Can Andy go in and cover? Andy's quite happy to go in and cover because he's got that experience and that willingness, because we're not going, all right, we're actually missing our first team goalkeeper today, and we're scrambling around and we're not prepared for this. So actually, now you are in a prepared situation because you've been able to identify from an incorporation of goalkeepers, and also getting your players to understand what the goalkeepers go through as well. Because there's a lot of demands, a lot of pressure, and as a defender, you get to see it a lot where the defender might blame the goalkeeper, for example, or the strikers, etc. Right, and it can be a bit of a blame culture within that, right? Because it is the last man trying to stop that goal from going in, and if it's gone in, he's at blame from the other perspectives, right? But it's actually going, do you know how hard it is to get down in and cover the size of that goal? Do you know how quickly he has to get down and cover that? Then you add in defenders, then you add in the pressure environment, then you hear what the sidelines are shouting at him, then you might have spectators within there. So actually he's got like 6 or 7 different elements that he's considering in a pressurized situation where the space as well around him, with where that ball catching prevention and all these little elements come in. Do you know how hard that is? And I think it again gives that education piece for players to understand what the goalkeeper goes through, and they can go, oh, actually, that was really tough there. And it gives you that communication style, gives you that team bonding, and it gives you that wider picture. So I really like what you said about that.
Yeah, and that relates to the player. But does that mean that we can actually get the coaches and the parents to put the gloves on then, for them to get a feel of what it's actually like? So they might stop moaning at the goalkeeper when the game's going on. So, that, but that's another story. But again, if your players are feeling that and they get an experience of sort of the psychological side of how a goalkeeper has to deal with those difficult moments, then yes, that's fantastic for the group, because all of a sudden they'll treat the goalkeeper in a totally different light. And I know I said that a little bit tongue in cheek, but that's important about the coaches and the parents, because they don't realise, and their reaction to situations and the way in which they react to, probably the more negative sort of outcomes that happen for young goalkeeper. It's massive in terms of, the retention numbers, in terms of keeping, players in goal. A lot of the time they don't want to play in goal because suddenly the coaches started shouting at them more and having a go at them. The parents have started, and that's what puts them off. And I think the more understanding that not only we give to their teammates, but also to the coaches that are working with them on a weekly basis, and also the parents, the easier it will become for the goalkeeper to be able to be comfortable in actually putting the gloves on and going and playing. A lot of the time they don't want to play, especially the younger end, because of all these issues and hassles they're getting from maybe the more, should we say, the more older and responsible elements of what they do. But are they older and responsible? Sometimes I ask the question if they are. But again, that's another story.
And another sort of piece on that parent sort of perspective and that relationship within that, right, is you might have 2 goalkeepers who are part of the team. One is your first team sort of goalkeeper, plays in, week out. Your other one is someone who can play in, but is always playing out and is happy to usually have that setup where they're outfield, the other one's in the net, right? But the coach faces a situation whereby the second keeper is like, I actually want to play in now for the next few weeks. I want to have a go. I want to be a bit more consistent. I want to get some few minutes. So the coach says, okay, to player number 2, you can go in. I'm going to put you as the first team goalkeeper now for the next 3 games. We're really going to get some minutes under your belt. But within doing so, goalkeeper 1 becomes a little bit frustrated, and he's like, I'm the goalkeeper. I don't really fancy going outfield. I've always been sort of number 1. And he might have had experiences where he has always been number 1 at other clubs. And he's one of those who might make or break and go, do you know what, I'm going to move on because I'm not number 1. But that's another sort of element within itself, and not sort of the purpose behind that discussion, right? But the parent is also involved in that, because they're going, oh, actually, my son should be number 1. He should be this and should be that. That's sort of a consideration. But the biggest focus there for a goalkeeper coach and someone who's in that environment, how would you manage those 2 players to go, actually, number 2 wants to go in and get some minutes under his belt, but how do we appease number 1 in a way where we want to try and keep him, but it's okay if he moves on? But how do we sort of manage 2 players within that situation is sort of the scope of that question.
Yeah, I think, again, it's dependent on the levels that you're playing at. Of course, when it's grassroots, obviously you want him to give everybody the opportunity to play. to play in the positions that they feel they want to have a go at playing, like we've already discussed around the goalkeeper, outfield player. I think the other thing that is easy to sort of share, especially with the goalkeepers, number one, is that by playing outfield, of course, like we've already discussed, they're going to get the opportunity to play under pressure. They're going to get the opportunity to develop their range of passing, their style of passing, their ball mastery. And of course, like we've said, the in-possession side of the game is huge now. I think, again, I'll go back to the point. It's probably, I don't think the tough part would be with the player or the keeper. It would be with the parents and the expectation around them. I think, and this is key, I think sometimes they need to have a step back and they need to look at the bigger picture. I think what happens is sometimes parents will get blinkered and they'll just focus on the individual that they're looking after, forgetting that there's other people involved in this and there's other sides of life that need to be looked at and thought about, and opportunities for others that they're allowed to do what they really want to do and try. So I think there are ways of pitching. I think that's the important thing as well when you're working with a group of goalkeepers, that you have that unity and that understanding. And it is a case of doing your work off the pitch, and having these conversations and talking things through. And I think a lot of the time what happens with these situations is that people think with emotion rather than logic. And that's what happens. The ego and the emotion takes over, when logically there's so many positive returns that can come from those situations if everybody just took a little bit of a step back and just give a little bit of thought to the effect that their emotional, egotistical side might have on others. Then they might look at it differently. And I think that's the way that these things should be handled. So again, take a step back, take a breath, look at the effect on everybody, not just one particular individual. There's so much more involved around that. So I think sensible conversations, logical, not emotional, making sure everybody gets the opportunity to do what they feel they'd like to do and try. I guess, of course, at grassroots level, it always comes down to the fact, why are we doing it? Is it to win a trophy at the end of the season, or is it to give people opportunity to go and love and enjoy what they do? And that's the big thing that parents and coaches have got to ask themselves. And look, at the end of the day, from a parental side, of course, they want their child to succeed and to do well and to get noticed and to go on to become a Premier League player. But the percentage of kids that actually do that is minuscule. So I think we've just got to be careful now that, because of the monies involved in football and the amount of opportunities that arise, not just for the player but for the families because of the money, like, we've just got to be careful how much these kids are being pushed into situations that they're not quite ready for. So I think as adults, we really need, again, to take a step back sometimes, take a breath, look at the bigger picture, take the emotion out of it and just think logically about the effect it's going to have on those young ones that we're looking after.
And there's a few elements within that, because it's also a big education piece, which has sort of become a driver in our conversation here as we've continued throughout. And I think there's a lot of scope for clubs to be doing that, but I also think it fits in with the club culture, the club environment as well, and how that is perceived, and building that as soon as players come in at, say, under 7 level, and you're going to be with them to under 16s. Actually, from under 7s, you have to start sort of bridging what you might be experiencing at under 16s and having a vision of going, right, I need to actually start to incorporate some of these elements. I need to get these messages over and start drip feeding them in. But then it's also that piece of not specializing a goalkeeper. So, a parent who might join you then at under 9s might come in and go, my boy's a goalkeeper. That's the only position he plays, and therefore he's going to be playing in goals for all the practice. And I've experienced that myself, whereby some players have come in and I've gone, actually, no, I don't want you to have gloves on. I want you to do some outfield work today. I want you to just warm up with all the players, and I want you to come in and be part of that, and just to get used to what I expect on match day. Let's how we warm up, what the other expectations are, and then you sort of have that sort of discussion whereby they're like, "Oh, why am I not training with the goalkeepers? Why am I not over there?" Well, actually, just for the warm up, I want you in with these. So I think it's just drip feeding that in and building your culture from within without having to specialize too early.
Well, if it brings any comfort, to those listening and watching in, I've been a massive advocate of that for a good number of years now. I'm not precious and possessive over the goalkeepers that I work with. They're not my goalkeepers. I don't own them. They don't belong to me. They belong to the organisations and the teams that I work with. So I never refer to them as my goalkeepers. They're not. I'm there to facilitate, to develop, to help, to guide. But ultimately, I'm there for the team and to make sure that the head coaches get best benefit from the goalkeepers that are working within our environment. I would, on many occasions during a season, and on a weekly basis, encourage the head coaches, the physical performance staff, to incorporate the goalkeepers into their activation and warm-up activities. Not only does it allow the goalkeepers to sort of work on different aspects of the game. So it might be, we're doing in the activation, we're doing some kind of passing exercise. Fantastic. Look how many ball contacts the goalkeepers are going to have with their feet in a game. So why not do some activation or warmth in that sense? But also, if we isolate the goalkeepers, all too often and for too long, we're losing the opportunity for them to build relationships, with the players that they're going to be playing with on a game by game basis. So bring them in, get them involved, get them building those relationships, understanding how different players communicate and work with each other. And that's, those are opportunities missed if we don't integrate the goalkeepers in with the rest of the group into practice. So as I say, I'm a massive advocate of that. And those that have been around me for a number of years, coaches that I work with, that they understand fully, that I'm not going to say no, they're mine for this amount of time every day. No, each morning I would say, right, what do you need? How long do you need them for? Let's work on that. And if a coach coming to me in the morning and said, right, Tom, I'm going to need the keepers for the whole session, fine, not a problem. I probably go out a little bit earlier or find a way, some spare minutes to get a little bit of activation and warm up done, and then bang, they're straight in with the group. I think the other thing that is important, especially when you're working at that level, is that there's an understanding from the coaches that your goalkeeper coach doesn't just offer the expertise when they're working with the keepers in isolation. We're more than qualified to go and spend time with you as the head coach, assistant coach, support staff, to actually drip feed our knowledge and detail and information when the goalkeepers are integrated into practice. But it's the other staff, the other coaches having a comfort to allow and to give license to the goalkeeper coach to be able to do that. I've been fortunate enough, in the last few jobs, the last few roles I've had where the coaches have been that way inclined. And it's brought so much more benefit to the groups that we work with, because it builds the trust not only in the players, but it builds the trust in your staff group. And, to succeed as a team, you have to have that trust.
And I've been in that academy environment myself, where you have your outfield players working with all your coaches, right? And then also you have your goalkeepers who might be at the other end there working with the goalkeeper coaches. Then they might go at the end, right, we're going to move all the goalkeepers into a small-sided game at the end, and therefore you incorporate them. So now you're coaching this game, you've got it running, etc. And you're like, right, I've got little Joey in goal, but I know absolutely nothing about him because he's been so isolated and I never see him, and he just gets thrown in perhaps at the end of the game for the last 10, 15 minutes, and that's the only time I sort of get to know him. So I think it's that relationship internally that you build within any organization, whether it be grassroots, academy, etc., because it's very difficult for you to be isolated away and then to put them into a small-sided game, and then for you as a goalkeeping coach to go, right, these are actually what I want as IDP points, etc. But then you as the outfield coach or team coach who's getting this goalkeeper back, you might find that difficult to go, well, actually, this is how the team is playing. I want them to be working on this. And therefore, you can start to have that conflict of interest, because what one coach wants is a sort of fight off between what the other wants. And I think it's actually overcoming that and bringing people together so they're aligned of, actually, how can we bring this together?
Of course it is, and that's something that I would always do, and I do it now, whether it be working with the England Blind squad, whether it be working with the Deaf squad, whether it be working in a club environment, or doing other pieces of work that I do. He's having these conversations. So I again, club level, you go in the morning, you sit as an MDT, you talk with the other coaching staff. I'd always want to get some information and detail as to what this session was going to look like, because my session with the goalkeepers, if I'm having time with them, would incorporate work that would be fit, the practices, that they're then going to go and link into when when they're doing their integrated work with the team. So it's no good. Let's say, for instance, we're on a Wednesday morning and we're working on in possession. So we're gonna start with the build part of the process, playing out from the back, and then I spend half an hour working on shot stopping. Okay, we're going to develop the goalkeepers' work in detail in terms of shot stopping, making saves and decisions and that kind of stuff, but it's not really going to link too much to what they're going into in the main crux of the session when they're working with the team. So I think that's, again, it comes down to trust, it comes down to understanding, but it also comes down to, my recognition, right, we're going to be focusing on this in the practices. What do we need to do to get the goalkeepers ready to go into those integrated practices when they're called upon? Now, that might be, I might only have 20 minutes. So in that 20 minutes, how can I best prepare the goalkeepers for the actions and the work that they're going to go into when they work with the group, when they're integrated in? So, at times that can be challenging. It becomes more challenging, of course, if you go in on the morning and you don't know exactly what the session is going to entail. It can change. Number of players change. You could, the coach could prepare for a squad of 22 and suddenly then they've got 17 and everything changed. You know what I'm saying? So the adaptability then I might have to show, because the focus of the session of the practices might change. So within a few seconds, I've then got to, appraise what's going on, adapt, and redo and plan for the practices that I was going to do in the beginning, and then just make the change very quickly. And that's the art of coaching. But that comes with experience, with building the knowledge up. If you said to me, we walked in the door and you said, right, Tom, we're going to focus on dealing with wide deliveries today. So straight away, I know what I'm going to do, because I know the type of practices that I need to be working on. So but that comes with experience. It comes with knowledge and building that session base for all the different aspects of the game, should you need them, off the cuff kind of thing.
And I think there it also comes into that relationship management, that squad management as well, and how you sort of work with your goalkeepers in that isolation as well. Because as a squad manager, right, I might find it very easy to rotate my outfield players, because I might go, right, I've got a CDM here. Actually, could he slot into centre back today? I've got a right back. Could he just touch up on right wing today? And I can be very adaptable in terms of how I manage a squad or look at SSGs, etc. Right? But it's very, very difficult. And some of the conversations I've had with other sort of head coaches or team managers on here, and they say, all right, we've got 4 or 5 goalkeepers in our squad. I'm like, how do you even manage 4 to 5 goalkeepers? Because I've only ever had squads with 2 goalkeepers, and I've had a squad once where I had 3, and I found it really difficult because they all offered me something very different. I liked each of them as characters, and if I slotted in goalkeeper 2, I know I'd be comfortable. If I slotted in goalkeeper 3, I was still comfortable. But I was like, how do you manage 4 or 5? So that's not a sort of situation I ever like to experience, because as much as we talk about squad levels, right, and depth, I don't think I'd want a lot of goalkeepers around the squad, because I feel a personal sort of commitment to them of going, right, actually, and you see it in a professional game, right, where you had, United years ago, and you had sort of Edwin van der Sar, Ben Foster, Thomas Cusack, right? Now, Ben Foster and Thomas Cusack, both ex-Birmingham goalkeepers as well, so a little bit of a personal one there for you, right, but as a fan. But they're both ones who went on to be first-team goalkeepers, so spent many years being number 2s and number 3s, and it's great that they had experience from Edwin van der Sar, and they were around that environment, etc. But they spent so many years sort of waiting, they missed out on so many games they perhaps could have picked up if they had moved on elsewhere. And that's a sort of frustrating piece that I see at times, of going, actually, you could have picked up a couple of 100 games here, or you could have been first team for an extra couple of years, and maybe you could have had a different experience because of that. And maybe that's why you see players like Foster and Cusack play till 36, 37, and then, maybe some beyond that, because they're trying to recover years that they feel that they may have missed out on. How difficult is it when you're in that situation? And I suppose it touches on that piece of the support you can offer, because I might go, actually, Tone, can you have a word with the goalkeepers? Can you reinforce what their roles are as a second and third goalkeeper? And how can we align that as a squad? But how difficult is it to manage goalkeepers who may feel they're missing out on those opportunities?
Yeah, I think it is difficult because ultimately they want to play. You know, they want to put the shirt on again. They want to be walking out in front of the big crowds. They don't want to be playing, you know, a development squad game in front of a handful of spectators. You know, so it is tough. Ultimately, it comes down to, again, like I said, you know, it's about the connection you build with the individuals that you're working with. And of course, over that period of time, you build the connection, you build the relationships, you build the trust. It's the toughest thing, you know, as a goalkeeper. There's only one position on the pitch, you know, and it's been spoken about for years and years, you know. How do you manage the group of keepers when you've only got one position? Well, again, it comes down to, like I said, just building those relationships, bringing the understanding that only one of you is going to play. You need that unity within the group. You need that support for each other. And I've been in environments where that clearly just hasn't happened, and you get kind of the atmosphere sometimes when you're on the training pitch can be a very difficult and a very awkward one. And I think ultimately that's when you show your mettle really as a coach, to be able to manage those difficult and tough situations. I think it is deep and meaningful conversations. I think the best thing, or the best way in which I have learned how to deal with it, is just being open and honest and working with absolute clarity. Because, players, goalkeepers ain't stupid. That they know, they'll understand, they see it. And I think what you've obviously got to give them an idea of is what their standing is, where they stand. And I think sometimes as coaches, we've got to be brave enough to sit people down and to explain why they're not going to be the starter, to explain what we think the differences are between the starter keeper, for instance, and the one that's going to be on the bench. Again, you look at squad rotation now, so there are physical aspects to it as well, in terms of resting keepers and so on and so forth. But I think ultimately it comes down to, like I said, just being open and honest, being truthful. I think the key thing is that if, especially at top level, where you've got your stats, where you've got your footage, where you can do your analysis, if you're saying to one goalkeeper, this goalkeeper's in ahead of you because of this, then you've got to back it up. You can't just say it on a wing and a prayer. You've got to back it up with stats. You've got to back it up with footage. You've got to back it up with, this was the last time you were in, this was the situation that's occurred, and that's why they're going to be playing. Now, some might find that hard to deal with and hard to grasp. But I know as a goalkeeper, I'd rather know what my fallibilities are and know that that's what I need to work on to get me into a position and an opportunity to go and have that shirt and play, than just having things be fluffy and just giving excuses. That for me, that I think that's probably the best way to operate, rather than skirting around the houses and again just being fluffy, or passing the buck and letting somebody else deal with it. So I was never afraid, I'm not afraid to have those tough and difficult situations. But ultimately, you can only play one. Yeah. So it's the rationale for that one, backed up with information and honesty and reality and stats and footage to offer to the other one as to why they're not playing, and why that one is your go-to when you're going to pick a team. And I think that's, for me, probably the way that goalkeepers would want to understand the situation.
And I think that moves in the territory of sort of academy and sort of elite environments as well, because grassroots is more about rotation, or is more about that goalkeeper development, where when you're touching upon these components here, it is that sort of an elite environment where it does become tough. It is fighting for places. It is about competition. And then it is down to that squad management. And as you're talking now, I'm really reflecting upon Joe Hart as he focused on the High Performance podcast of when Pep Guardiola came into City, he said, "You're not part of my plans." And he just couldn't fathom that, because he's like, I'm not feeling like you've given me a chance, but I'm willing to stay and I'm willing to work with you in terms of getting up to what you think I need as a goalkeeper. But for Pep, he was like, I've got a goalkeeper in mind and this is what's happening. You're just not part of my plans. And it can be very difficult because he sort of has those unanswered questions in his head of going, right, I was number one. I moved on in my career and I was still number one, but why couldn't I have been number one for you? And I suppose he understands it from a concept of, Bravo previously at Barcelona with Pep, and he had the ability to fit the style, and Pep wanted to bring in some lieutenants and players he was accustomed to. But it was one of those where it can be really difficult as that individual away from that to go, why aren't I good enough? Why am I suddenly going from being number one to number two? Why am I not being selected anymore in my career? Why have I got to move on from the place I love because someone else has got a different perspective on me,
And that's the game, and by the way, we're questioning Pep here, who is probably, if not the one of the greatest coaches ever lived. So, he'll make that decision. Obviously he had in his mind immediately, and don't think for a second that, that was just on a wing and a prayer. He would have obviously watched Joe, and I'm not saying it was the right or the wrong thing to do for a second. I was a massive supporter of Joe Hart. I loved his journey. I loved his career. I loved it when he played for England. So don't think for a second that I'm agreeing with that. But, the point is, it's a game of opinions. The manager obviously wants to play in a certain way. He wants certain players to play in the team that play in a certain way. And of course, he went with Bravo. But ultimately, Bravo didn't last particularly that long. And all of a sudden, Ederson's in. Now, Ederson has been the one. He's been the one that's fulfilled the role exactly, to the way that Guardiola wants the team to play and the goalkeeper to play. I think with Joe, it was a really tough one, and I think it culminated in a real drop off for him in terms of his career. And like recently, he's done fantastically well up in Scotland. Obviously, had a brilliant end to his career with Celtic. So I was really pleased for him. But I think, in those moments, like any kind of moment that happens, you might not get the answers. It's happened to me in my coaching life where, I've been in a situation where, I was moved on from a position and I had no idea why, and it was never explained to me why. But ultimately, what I didn't do was sit there and dwell on it and think about, woe is me, and it's my fault, I've done this, I've done that. No, ultimately, people make choices. People make decisions based on whatever they want to do. That was a curveball that was thrown at me. It was a curveball that was thrown at Joe Hart. It's how we deal with that moment. It's how we move on from that moment is the most important thing. And there's a lot around, psychology and philosophy and trains of thought and everything nowadays. And, but for me, I'm like, okay, you don't think I'm the one that's going to provide that for you, no problem, I'll move on and I go and do what I do best somewhere else. Ultimately in my situation, when it happened to me, that's what I did. My response was, I'm not going to dwell on it, I'm not going to overthink it, I'm going to move on, I'm going to go and excel, and I'm going to continue to do what I do, but do it elsewhere. And that's what I've done. And I've done that for the last, 7, 8, 9 years since it happened. And ultimately, I'm proud of myself for dealing with that situation in the way I did, and being the professional that I am, and moving on, and still going and staying in the game and believing in me to be able to go and deliver the message the way I deliver the message in my own unique way. And I'm sure, once Joe Hart got his head around it, that's what he did. It was a tough time for him, and it took him probably 2 or 3 clubs to get himself sorted out and come to grips with it. But ultimately, like I said, what a fantastic end, to the career that he had. And like, wonderfully now, he's going to go and do some punditry. So the goalkeepers now at top level are going to get some fantastic support from Joe Hart as a pundit moving forward, which is great news for goalkeepers, that play in the professional game, and they're going to be on TV. So wonderful news.
And I think that's great because it does provide that insight, because we don't get many goalkeepers who appear on sort of professional, networks, and getting that insight and that little detail which comes into it. And there's sort of 2 different avenues I want to explore here with you, but we'll get onto the second one in a moment, Tone. But do you think it's more difficult then for English goalkeepers to maintain their number one spot at professional clubs of Arsenal, Chelsea, United, City, for example? Because as you're speaking now, I'm thinking of Joe Hart. Obviously, he was dropped from City as number one, right? Even as you're talking, I'm thinking Aaron Ramsdale dropped from number one, all because, again, perspective and team management and what Arteta wants to do. And he did give Ramsdale that chance. He's went on and changed his mind on Ben Leno as well. And then he's gone in and got a Raya in now. So obviously, in his mind, he's kept adapting because it just hasn't suited the way that he's wanted to play for whatever reason. But for those English goalkeepers, and okay, we got Pickford, who's Everton, and he's been very consistent at Everton for a few years and got himself England number one. Dean Henderson has moved on from United and has gone to Crystal Palace. But do you think it's harder for those English goalkeepers to be at the top end of the Premier League?
I think that the big thing is now we have such a diverse league, in terms of managers at the clubs. English managers, there's not a massive number. So you have got more of a foreign influx. So they will have different opinions. There's so many different cultures and backgrounds and environments of coaching coming into the Premier League now. And they'll all have their own way of thinking, of playing, of best setting their teams up for success. Now, for me, it shouldn't matter what nationality you are. If you're good enough to fulfill a role, then why should that matter? Does that make sense? It doesn't matter whether you're English, Spanish, French. Look at De Gea. De Gea hasn't been able to find a club for 12 months. So the last 12 months he's been working away, under the radar, just working privately, so on and so on. And then suddenly, he gets a club, and fantastic for him. But it doesn't matter who you are. If you're good enough in the moment, you're good enough. Whatever nationality you are, you'll get the opportunities that come by being on a level. If you're not performing, if you're not fitting the way that the coach wants the team to play, or your skill set doesn't link to the way that the team philosophy or strategy is, then you're not going to get the opportunity. For me, obviously I'm an English British coach, and I know we've got some wonderfully talented goalkeepers here. So I don't have the answer for you as to why English British goalkeepers don't get the opportunity. All I can say is that there's such diversity around everything that we have now in football in this country, and different cultures and environments and everything else, that managers will do what they need to do to get success. Whether that be with an English goalkeeper, a Spanish goalkeeper, a French goalkeeper, that shouldn't matter, and it doesn't matter. If you're good enough to do the job, you get in. If you're not, you won't. And ultimately that's where we're at. So I think that the key for me is that with obviously in academies and so on, predominantly that in this country there will be English British based, with an upbringing through the English football culture. Obviously I want to see more English and British goalkeepers get an opportunity in the Premier League, but who am I to dictate to Pep or to other unbelievably gifted coaches that are applying their trade in this country in the Premier League? It's down to choice. It's down to preference. How much of an effect we as coaches can have on that, I don't know. I don't think we have a lot of effect on it. Probably, they're more affected by the results and by the money people from the top more than anything.
And I think, in a way, we are very lucky in terms of England fans, right, to have such an array of goalkeepers available to us right now. Because when you look at it, right, you've got Jordan Pickford, number one at Everton. You've got Aaron Ramsdale, still number two at Arsenal, but still a very prestigious role, right? It's not like he's sitting around at Chesterfield Town and he's our next selection. He's still at one of the top clubs in Europe. You've got Nick Pope, you've got Dean Henderson, who's a number one as well. And then you look at that, you've got Sam Johnston. And then even if you were to look behind that last year, you had Joe Hart, number one at Celtic in the Scottish Premier League, challenging for a title, some European football at the start of the year, and yet playing week in, week out, gets nowhere near that squad. So that competition is very, very fierce, but it's also a very positive thing as a team manager to go, I've got so much selection available. So if Pickford was to pick up a long-term injury, right, have I got Ramsdale? Ramsdale, dropped out of form. Who's next? Oh, Dean Henderson has been very consistent. Can we look at him? So yeah, I was a big fan of the fact that Southgate started Ramsdale in that Euro friendly, because I just want to see Ramsdale get some minutes under his belt and build that confidence. But you, as a goalkeeper coach, who might be working with a goalkeeper like that, he's second to country, second to club. He's dropped from number one. He's lacking minutes, and we saw in that game his confidence is at a real low, and that's why he sort of made that mistake and conceded that goal, right? And it's difficult because you know he's got those qualities to get back up there, but that confidence piece is huge right now. For him to come back and recover from that, probably a real low right now for him. What, aside from technical goalkeeping, if he was to sit in a conversation and say, Tone, how can we approach this? What can I do? What would you even start discussing? Would it be all the human elements? Would it be your squad management? How would you go into approaching that? Because it doesn't always have to be about football first.
Yeah, again, I think like you look at going back to what you were talking about, obviously in playing, Gareth couldn't go into the tournament with only Jordan playing, the games. They needed to get another goalkeeper on the pitch to get some minutes going into the tournament. So that's probably why that happened. Again, lack of minutes for Aaron Ramsdale, coming into the game, that people don't realise, he hadn't had many minutes and played a lot of football in the build up to that game. So he's going in a little bit rusty, a little bit raw. So that doesn't help, So I think that plays a part. And this is, again, people's perception and understanding of actually the pressure that the individual's under when they put the gloves on. Jordan's been playing all season. He's been playing regular, playing consistent. And of course, for England, he's been, a fantastic servant and one of England's most consistent players over a number of years now. He's done fantastic. Jordan Pickford, I'm a big fan. So, again, tough if you're understudy for Jordan Pickford to actually think, when am I actually going to get a chance to play for England? And that's difficult. So again, how you manage those players, how you manage that group under Jordan Pickford is not an easy one, because they're all more than capable of playing international football. But you don't just leave Jordan out for the sake of it. He hasn't done anything to be left out, so you keep him in. He's got that experience, he's got that knowledge. Again, I think that you going back to what you said about, what do you say? Again, these are the difficult conversations as a goalkeeper coach that you have to have. This is where your personable skills come to the fore. That's something that I've always prided myself on, is being able, and I guess it's because I have played the game and been around a professional game and had difficult situations. And of course, in coaching, I've had, not just a plain sailing pathway. I have had tough moments, and I had decisions that I haven't agreed with, or I haven't enjoyed. But ultimately, those things happen, and what you can't do is dwell on them. You use them and you keep them as reference points to draw upon should you need them in the future. But if you dwell on them, it's going to affect the next thing you do and the next thing you do after that. It's finding the mechanisms and finding the ways to move forward from those difficult moments to then go and be able to perform to the best of your ability and be the best you can be in everything that you do moving forward, because you can't affect that. You can't change that. But this is where those connections, those relationships with the individuals that you're working with are of paramount importance. Because if you don't have those connections and those relationships, doesn't matter what you say, it's not going to get through. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to believe you. And for me, that's what I always try and get across to the keepers. This is just one moment. This is just one moment on your journey, on that long journey. You spend too much time dwelling on it, you're not going to enjoy what you're going to next. You're not going to be able to thrive into what you're going next. And the way I look at it, I told you about the injury, and I had this injury. I didn't know the day that I walked out at Darlington Football Club, which is where it happened, and I was playing for Scarborough. I didn't know that day that was going to be the last day that I ever walked onto a professional football pitch into a game. Now, none of us know when that moment's going to come, and it will come. whether it be through injury, whether it be through, like Joe, he's had a long career, now he's called it time. But if we don't go into every training session, into every game opportunity that we have, giving our all, being the best we can be, when that moment comes, I'll look back and I'll regret it, because I'll have spent time thinking about and dwelling on things that I can't change, that I can't affect. And a lot of the time in football, a lot of the things that go on, it's out of your control. There are a lot of things that you don't have a say in, that you can't control. What you can control is how you deal with it, is how you move on from it. You know, this summer has been a massive summer of transition for me, you know, personally, in terms of my jobs and roles and everything else. And I think, you know, part of that is what drew us together with the stuff that I put out on X. You know, we don't need to go into that, but you know, it's created a lot of interest in my thought processes and the way I deal with things and what I speak about. So I'm going through a period of transition now. I've had situations that have arose that have been difficult, but what I haven't done is sat there and dwelt on it and mulled over it and got negative around it, because it's not going to help me move forward. It's not going to help me go and continue to provide a service with other organisations, other teams, other people that I'm working with. Now, all of a sudden, I've got the prospect of other projects coming up that have just spawned out of nothing. And if I'd have dwelt on what has gone, these things would never have happened. So I've rolled my sleeves up, I've got forward thinking, and I'm moving. And that's the way to be. And the same with goalkeeping. Things happen that you can't control. Might be conceding a goal, a poor goal. It might be you're getting left out of the team. It might be that you're moving clubs. It might be that a manager comes in and doesn't like what he sees and you're not going to fit. Fine. But dwell on it, you ain't going to move forward. Think about it too much, overthink it. It's going to affect what you do next. Deal with the curveball. Find a mechanism, find a way to stay strong, to move on, and you'll become better for it. And that's the way I've been now over the last 15, 20 years. For every negative that happens, I'll find two positives. And, you know, as I said, that's what's happened with me recently. From one difficult situation, now I've got 5 or 6 absolutely unbelievable opportunities ahead of me, and I'm going to make best fist of them, trust me.
I love the way that you pieced that together, and I like how you really talk about that mindset piece and the importance of resilience within that, the importance of having a positive outlook towards what negative is. And I suppose that's the way that I approach everything. It's like, okay, that's a negative situation, but do I feel the negative of it? Do I really need to feel the negative of it? Because I want to see the positive in it. I want to see, actually, does it really affect me that much? Actually, my life moves on past this. Where's the next step? Do I need to let my mindset, my time be affected by what that negative situation was at 9 o'clock this morning? Probably not, because I need to move on from it. And, you know, sometimes there's other avenues that we need to explore within situations that might arise. But realistic, do I need to allocate as much time in terms of negativity towards positivity? Well, no, I don't, because positivity should outweigh that massively. And if we're going to outweigh it, then we're going to be in a real good situation where we can overcome these adverse situations. And it's you touched upon it there, and this is one of the reasons we reached out. And when I sort of thought about this podcast episode before having this conversation with you, was actually, I want 3 parts to this. I want to talk about the goalkeepers and your experience, because you have so much to offer. I want to touch upon the professional game a little bit and how we can link that together, and then how could we link the adversities of goalkeepers into what our initial discussion was, and without touching upon it within too much detail, as you just said there, right? Because the conversation has taken such a great flow in terms of what you're able to offer technically for goalkeepers, and then what the focus of this episode has become. But I think it's that difficult situation that we face as coaches, right? Relating this to some kind of adversity in our mindset within this, and just trying to touch into that piece which you shared on X the other day, right? And it is difficult, because I remember walking away from the game years ago, and I was coaching in the academy, I was coaching at grassroots football, and I had that good combination of, I was loving football, I was loving the academy, but I was like, what is the purpose of this right now? I've been doing this for so many years. I'm constantly traveling to games. It's costing me the expense of my time, my commitment, and actually it's taken away my enjoyment in life of going, actually, I turned down going out tonight with my mates because I've got a training session to do. Or actually, do people remember what that training session is? There's other elements whereby I missed my dad's graduation to go academy training, and that's probably one of the biggest regrets I have, right? And I was like, no, I should never have done that unless, you know, I was at the elite game of managing like Chelsea or England, for example, right? But even then, you still shouldn't, because they're key moments within your lives. And I think it's those moments that you need to explore and to make sure that you have, to make sure the game doesn't outweigh to its own benefit rather than it being a limitation to us within our lives and us being on the back foot within those situations.
Yeah, I mean, without going too deep into it, because you know, on the back of that has spawned the opportunity for me now to sort of bring to the fore my own goalkeeping podcast.
Yep.
So that's probably going to be the big topic of conversation when we launch and when we do the first one. So everything I'm doing here, Luke, I'm gaining experiences into sort of going into my own podcast. But yeah, look, the reason why I put that out, I'm very passionate about the game. I love the game. I've been fortunate enough over the years to work across 8 different formats of the game, to work at grassroots level, club level, international elite level, traveled the world. Football has given me an unbelievable opportunity. But you know what? I've grafted for every one of those opportunities. I've sacrificed time with family, with loved ones. I've lost count of how many birthdays of my children I've missed. I missed the birth of my grandson, my first grandson. I missed his birth because I was away working internationally, you know. And I think I remember I was speaking to somebody about it. I've been privileged and honoured to work in different groups. I went to the Rio Paralympics in 2016 with the Great Britain Cerebral Palsy team and represented Great Britain. So that year, the build up to that year was huge. And I'm not just saying this was just for that role, but in that year, so from the summer of 2015 to the summer of 2016 and through the tournament, I actually spent 275 days of that year away from home, not sleeping in my own bed. So, like, I can never get that time back. But what I was doing in that time was dedicating myself to the cause, giving everything I had, whoever it was with, because at the time I was working with 3 national teams. I was doing some club stuff, private stuff, but ultimately it was around that environment that a lot of the days were taken. But ultimately, I lost so much time with family. But even when I was with family, I'd still be working. I'd still be at my laptop. I'd be analysing opposition. I'd be putting set play presentations together. I'd be profiling opposition goalkeepers so that we could find ways of exploiting the opposition. You know, even when I work in club, you know, so you know, an idea of a day could be I'd go in the office at, you know, I'd be in for 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then obviously you're preparing, you're having meetings, you're talking to staff, you're working with the players, then you're going on the grass and you're doing your session. You might have a quick bite to eat, and then you're back at the laptop because you're preparing for the upcoming game and so on and so forth. And I'd be in the office till, you know, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock, even later some days. Now, some coaches might be there till 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. That's fine. Now, the reason why I would only be there till those times, because I was also doing my own private work, i.e. my own mentor program, to supplement my income. Okay. So, for instance, I get home at, I don't know, once I got through the traffic, I'll be home at 6 o'clock. I'd have a quick conversation with my wife, Tracy. We'd have a quick bite to eat. I'd be on the video calls from 7 o'clock. And I could be doing video calls till 10:30, 11. Then I'd get back on my laptop and I'd be finishing off any kind of work that I need to finish in preparation for the next day or for the upcoming fixture for the group that I'm working with. Now, that's not just a one-off. That's probably 6 days a week, more times than not. So the reason why I felt compelled to talk about what I did was there's got to come a point where it stops, where there has to be recognition of how much is actually going on away from the environment where we're being employed, or the employer, the actual office or place of work where we are, because there's so much other work going on outside of that supplements and complements everything else that's going on, but it's not recognized financially. The salary is given, but there's an expectation that will cover all of these different things on the job spec, but you're never going to have enough hours in the day. And definitely you're never going to be recompensed enough financially to cover all of those hours that you put in, all the time you spend at the laptop, all the hours I lose with family, all the holidays that I don't have, all the time that I spend over festive periods working, and so on and so forth. So, and that's not just about me. You know, I've probably got another 10 years left at what I do, and I love what I do, and I'll continue to do what I do. And that'll be on the grass, off the grass. I'm still fit as a fiddle. So I can still, do as much on the grass as anybody can in terms of goalkeeper coaching. Don't ever think that I can't. I've looked after myself. So that's not the thing. What I worry about, and you can see by the response that I've had, is the amount of coaches that feel the same but have never felt brave enough to be able to speak up about it. And that's what's happened. The amount of, and what you see on the social media outlets and the response that I've had is only a tiny percentage of the feedback you get. And why? Because most are frightened to voice what they really feel on the social media outlets because of the backlash that they will get, because they've actually spoken the truth, because they've actually brought awareness to people that have no idea what they do, no idea the hours they spend, no idea the sacrifice they make. They just give a salary and go, right, we'll get that out of them. And you know what? If they don't do it, we'll just get somebody else to do it. Doesn't matter how good they are. We'll just get some, because somebody else will take it. And that's what happens. People take the roles because they want the roles, because they don't want to not be in the game. But that's not right, because they deserve to be paid for the love, the care, the attention, the diligence, and the sacrifice that they make to make sure that the wheels keep turning, because other staff members do. Now, goalkeeper coaches need to. And I think it's time now that those goalkeeper coaches who, when you think about it in terms of education, we have to do double what other coaching staff do. So we have to do not just the goalkeeping qualifications, we have to do the outfield qualifications as well. So we have to double our workload in terms of getting the knowledge and gaining the knowledge and the certification to be able to get the jobs. But now's the time where organisations really need to have a good look at the job specs, to have a look at the hours that these people are working, and they need to have salaries that justify the work they put in, and not to be at the bottom of the pile when budgets are decided and how those budgets are spread across the MDT. Because we're much more than the kicker of the ball in the corner with the goalie. Those days have got to end now, because these people are losing elements of their life because they're giving so much for very little back. And we're losing great people out of the game, because now, they can go and work full time at Tesco's for another 10 grand a year, and that's what they're going to go and do. So we're losing wonderful, brilliantly, knowledgeable coaches, because they're just not going to get the kind of money they need to survive and live. And it has to change. So I just felt that, why not me? I just think somebody got to do it. And it's like anything in life, you stick your head above the parapet. You don't know what the comeback's going to be. You don't know what the risk is. But I feel I've done it out of love for football, for goalkeeping, for goalkeeper coaches, because I want goalkeeper coaches to be rewarded now for the important people that they are. And unless somebody speaks about it, it's not going to change. So somewhere out there, someone will really look at what I'm saying, understand it, and go, do you know what? He's right. We're going to make a change. And if that creates a shift and a change, that's the legacy I'll leave. If it costs me, it costs me. But I've done it for other people, not just for me.
And I think, as you said there, you're going to talk about it more on your podcast, and that's what you can open up with in the first episode. So I think once Tony releases his podcast, I think that's going to be a real open episode to really listen to, whether you're an aspiring coach, a current coach, or someone who's been in the game for a long time, because it is a very difficult place to be. And I remember coaching in the academy. I'd have my contacts with the Shadow Squad on a Monday. I'd be with the academy on a Wednesday, academy on a Friday. I'd then have a contact on Sunday, and then I'd be expected to do the PMA on a Sunday afternoon after a game to make sure it was up to date weekly to be in accordance with the Premier League standards and the club standards. But you didn't get paid for any of that time. You didn't get paid for your travel in between. So actually, you're not delivering a 2-hour coaching session across the week, and therefore it's 6 hours coaching. You have to accumulate all the other time in and around that. You're planning, you're getting the equipment in between that, and it is a lot of demand for a part-time coach. But then you look at full-time coaches and their sort of wage structure as well. And I remember when the head of foundation phase job was advertised, it was advertised at the same rate as a level 2 teaching assistant in a high school. Now you compare those two jobs. Okay, one is in football that you may want, but you're in charge of foundation phase. You're in a very good position that you may be able to progress, but you compare that to a TA level 2, right? You get all your school holidays, you get school pension, you might have progression through that route there. You have other scopes and avenues there. So if you're young, actually the level 2 job might suit you down to the ground to go on holidays, to go and have that time away, and then to maybe coach part-time and decide what hours you want, because you might actually be financially better off doing that way than being the head of a foundation phase. But they're sort of questions that come up in the game, and that will be explored on your podcast even further. But I think it's such a difficult place, and that's one of the reasons that I stopped academy coaching at one point, because I was like, I'm putting in all this time and effort, and someone was saying to me, you're doing that again? I'm like, yeah, I've got to, because if I don't do it, then the club's onto my back, and therefore I'm held accountable for that, and therefore my team hasn't been presented, and I have to give my best to those players, because again, they're part of the academy for a reason, and if I don't coach them, then that's on me, because they haven't had that development. But there are loads of different scopes and sort of accountabilities, and the loads of pressures on each of us, which comes from the coaching environment. But I look forward to what your podcast has to offer, Tone, because just sitting here with you for the last hour and a half today has really been insightful, and I've enjoyed every moment with you. So I can't wait for you to release your content and what you bring out, and certainly take away from that. But what I always do with every coach or guest who comes on the pod, right, is finish with a Q&A. So Tone, it's under the Q&A time to finish up with. Nothing to catch you out. It should all be fun and away from there, right, mate? Okay,
cool. Yeah, far away.
All right, fab. If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Empathetic, hardworking, so there's an extra word in there, and caring.
Good choices. I completely agree. If you could move to any country to coach, where would it be?
USA. Any
particular reason?
Yeah, I've been across to the States, and I think it's an environment that I love working in. I love the culture. I love the opportunity there, but also I think they do need help in terms of like goalkeeper coaching. They need support, and I know that with my knowledge and expertise, I could definitely help them in many areas of coach development over there. And obviously I've got a lot of friends in the goalkeeping world and my network that continually speak to me about that. So it is something that who knows, the opportunity may arise one day. But yeah, I'd love to go to the US and share my knowledge and expertise, and maybe help develop the next generation of goalkeeper coaches in the US. Who knows?
What a great answer, great selection. I think the prospect of what's in the USA is yet to be seen in terms of what's coming in the future. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Great question. I suppose like the obvious answer would be Pep, wouldn't it? I think he just his knowledge, just his understanding of the game. I think I would have loved to have been around Alex Ferguson in his prime. I did actually play against Man United when Ferguson was in his prime at United, but I never got the chance to meet him. So he would have been one. But I think currently, it's probably a boring one, but I'd just love to be around Pep for a few hours just to get his insight. And I'd be really, really keen to just get his thoughts on goalkeeping and his philosophy and strategy. So that would be a really interesting conversation I'd love to have with him.
Interesting, definitely. Who is your all-time favorite goalkeeper then?
Oh, again, great question. I've got a few, but I suppose my hero, role model, go-to keeper when I was a youngster was Tony Coton, who was the goalkeeper at Birmingham City, Man City, Watford. As a schoolboy at Birmingham, Coates kind of took me under his wing, and I've got a lot to thank him for. I kind of modelled myself on him as a young goalkeeper. Eventually grew out of that, but he probably won't thank me for that. But yeah, he was probably sort of my hero on that. But I think goalkeeping wise now, when I think back of in terms of the game, probably Peter Schmeichel would be the one that I'd always say for me would probably be the greatest.
Solid choices, definitely. I know you've alluded to quite a lot throughout this podcast, right? And there's a load of real takeaways that I really want to solidify at the end of this in terms of a wrap up, in terms of the description that goes with it, right? But if you had to give one top tip to any coach, regardless whether it's goalkeeping or not, what is your one top tip?
Prepare for the curveball. So always have a plan B in mind, whether that be in a coaching session where your numbers might differ, when you go and sit in a meeting and the head coach changes the session right there in front of you from what it was originally planned, whether it be, a decision in your life where, like we've spoke about, if somebody doesn't, agree with your way of working or want your particular skill set in a position. But be prepared for the curveball, be adaptable and be ready to move on and just be the best you can be in everything you do.
If you could take one job in football, any job, whether that be a manager or assistant manager, whether it's at the highest elite level, whether it's at the lowest, what job would you like?
I'm doing it. I'm the lead goalkeeper coach with the England para group, so I get the opportunity to develop and work with the goalkeeper coaches and the goalkeepers of the England disability football pathway. For me, I wouldn't have not wanted that opportunity ever in my life. For me, it's been an unbelievable 10 or 12 years working as a goalkeeper coach in disability formats. And so if you ask me about that, there's no greater joy that I've got in my coaching career as that one. So nothing could match that. I'll do other jobs and other roles, but to be able to have had that role and to continue to do that role, nothing will ever match that.
I love that. What a top answer. I think that's so authentic as well, because sometimes it's quite difficult, again, as we touched upon earlier, is that ego side in football. But I think that authenticity that you brought with that answer, I think is really touching. But just thinking about what you said there in terms of that power and the job that you do in terms of leading that, right? I think you might or may not know this name, but I can just make a sort of connection. So I currently started working with someone this year. He's been all over the world. He's traveled and he's had the most amazing experiences. So he was talking about the podcast earlier this year because we worked together, and he was talking about some people that he sort of knew as well, and there's one name which is sort of, I think, involved in para goalkeeping, right? On the female side, you might know her, it might not, but Katie Christopher, so she is someone that I've on Instagram, and I see her post quite a lot, and it was only because you said that there I was like, I wonder if there's a little connection there. So
Kate is one of our female blind squad goalkeepers. We've got a pool of 4 at the moment, and Katie's one of those goalkeepers. I've spent a lot of time with Katie and worked with Katie. So fantastic goalkeeper, and one of a brilliant group of 4 that we got currently in that squad.
A lot of what I see is a very positive and good feeling about the squad from just even a social media perspective, being here in Wales compared to what she's doing, in England stuff. I think it's very touching in terms of what is going on right now. If you weren't coaching altogether, Tony, what would you be doing?
Well, as you can see, I love reading. What you see behind me is just one set of bookshelves. I've got another 2 or 3 to the right here. So I'm an avid reader, and I did release a book a few years ago, A Modern Approach to Goalkeeping. So if I wasn't coaching, I guess I'd probably be writing or doing some kind of sort of coach support in a written form. So I'm very passionate about that. So that's something that I'll probably enjoy doing as a full-time job.
Interesting. In coaching, right, what is your biggest pet peeve?
Coaches that berate goalkeepers, or berate goalkeeper coaches when the goalkeeper doesn't do something right. So, because in a game, how often would I, as a goalkeeper coach, have a go at the coach when a midfield player misplaces a pass or a defender doesn't clear a ball? Probably never happens. But if the goalkeeper drops one or makes a mistake, straight away the head turns. What they're doing there? Why have they done that? I'm here. I'm still here. I don't know. So yeah. So that's probably my pet peeve. Yeah. Those
like
who berate the goalkeeper coach. Yeah.
I like that. Just for a perspective sort of piece there, and that consideration of how you react on the side, whether you're in that role, I think it just brings that little consideration piece there. As a coach altogether, right, and you're delivering any session at any club at any time, or you're going in as a guest coach, anything like that, right? What are your non-negotiables for working with the players in front of you for, say, an hour or whatever the period is?
Eyes and ears. Yeah, just tap in. Yeah, so just always aware of what the coach is offering, and just being focused. I think just being open-minded. Yeah, just willing to take information on board and learn. But also, the biggest thing for me is to go out and flourish, go out and enjoy. So those would probably be the 3 big things that I'd want them to sort of think about when they come in and work with me. I tend to work in threes. It's easy to deliver, simple to retain. So that's the way I tend to think.
Again, I like that, and I like that takeaway as well, sort of to bridge upon that. Final 2 now, Tony. What does reflection mean to you?
Just reviewing what's gone. Just going over what has been, trying to draw the most positive things that you can from those situations. Obviously, looking at the not so positive side of it, but using them for reference. So I think just taking what has been, storing it, putting it in the hard drive, use it for future reference. So that would be what reflection is to me.
I like that. Again, I like it. And the final one, and I know you touched upon it at the start, but I always like to wrap up the episode with this as a final sign off. What is the one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
Literally just seeing the joy that others can get from the game, and just with the moments we share, with the detail we offer, helping them just to be the best they can be, and to go and succeed in whatever they do at whatever level that they are in the game. It's not said I've had my career. It's not about me now. My purpose, my job while I'm on this planet, as long as I'm on it, is to make sure that those I work with are enthralled and enjoy and go on to just love what they do and get some success from it.
Well, Tony, it's been a fantastic hour and 40 with you, and there's been so much which I've taken away from you just on the notes as we've been chatting throughout. But again, mate, I really appreciate your time, and I know that we originally connected over a separate issue, and this conversation has been toned by your coaching experience and what you do technically, and I really appreciate that, because you've sort of taken the floor away and built upon sort of what I wanted as one piece of this conversation has really been a positive conversation and really in depth towards goalkeepers, and this part of the CPD sort of in the back of my mind that I'm going to send out to my club coaches when I release this podcast, because I think there's so much that they can take away for when they're working with their teams on the grass, and I can picture them and going into sessions about how they can build upon what they do. So I really appreciate your time, mate, and I love everything that you're doing, and I can't wait to listen to your podcast episode. So for anyone who's out there and wants to know more about goalkeeping and more about the professional game and how that looks in terms of us and that commitment that Tony spoke about earlier, and what the demands are personally and the moments that you miss, then Tony's going to open up with that on his podcast. But definitely one to look out for. Check out the socials. Tony, what's your handle on Twitter?
So it's TEGK1.
So definitely check Tony out, because he's got quite an array of resources and affections and perspectives that he shares upon his socials. But mate, thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of the day. And again, I've taken so much away from this.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for inviting me on, and hopefully the listeners and the viewers can take plenty away, and it will help them look after the ones they work with.
Well, I'm sure they will. And again, thank you and take care. And bye for now, mate.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people, because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other 2, and that's absolutely fine.